hard to bring in good new habits or discard habits you know aren't serving you? Today's show is all about it. Gina, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so good to be with you, Alex.
I'm really excited to chat to you. I've been following your work for a while. Your book is excellent that came out just this January past. And obviously, you were doing a lot of work on habits way before you wrote the book on it. And I want to unpack a few different things as we chat today. So, first is just a personal question around when did habits start to become something that you personally were trying to unpack, maybe for personal reasons or academically? Which one came first for you and why?
Definitely personal reasons. I feel like anyone who's like a super freak in terms of like being really into what they're doing, in my
Mm,
experience anyway, has had some sort of personal story or journey
mm,
with, whatever their interest is. For me, I really struggled with my eating habits. I struggled with not having consistency. And I also struggled with not eating to my values. Like I wanted to eat healthy and, live a certain lifestyle, and I didn't. And I felt like I was out of
mm,
control with that. And that's what really got me interested in this idea of, well, how to create sustainable change. I can do something for half a day or even a day if I'm having a really good day. But how do I make it sustain long term so that this becomes my life, my identity, who I am, just how I live? And that's what started my fascination with habits.
Oh, I love that. And and so it's so good what you say there around how do I make it true to my values? Like how do I get those things to match up? And
Mm.
so why is it that they don't? Because surely, we do all that values work and we really connect to beautiful stories around health and where food comes from and produce versus ultra processed crap and then like why can't we just do it if we know it?
In
It's the million
knowledge,
dollar question.
yeah, I mean, knowledge is power to some extent, but we're not driven by our knowledge. We're driven often by our emotions. It's our
Mm,
emotions that play the biggest role in why we do the things we do. And yes, we might have all this great knowledge about all these beautiful foods and wonderful lifestyle, but there's all this other world that's easy and convenient and dopaminergic, and it makes us feel good, and it's accessible and it's affordable and it's socially acceptable, and it becomes really easy to fall into the things that give us short-term pleasure. Because let's admit it, something like a chocolate or an Oreo is going to make you feel good in the moment more than something like kale or a stick of celery. In the
mm,
moment, your dopamine is like, hey, I actually prefer the taste of chocolate than I do to celery, for example. So those short-term pleasures become tempting. They become, yeah, like something that we're drawn to, especially when we're stressed or tired or fatigued.
mm. And the way the modern world is set up from an access, convenience, and cost perspective, what gets subsidized, it's all the grains. And, we could just go on and on about the food system implications, but we really are geared against ourselves in modern life. And do you think a part of us starting to actually feel more successful around habit adoption is learning about how hard it is? Like, can that actually be a part of, wow, you are doing so great, even doing this 3 days in a row. Look at this system that's doing everything to make sure that you don't eat healthy.
Yeah, totally. I actually think I like to call it counting the cost, because every single change we make in our life comes with some sort of sacrifice. Like my husband and I love making raw desserts, and like we just like love making everything from scratch, whether it's our bread or crackers, and we just like take pride in doing things like that. But we
Mm,
know that for us, we don't have children, we've got plenty of time, we've got resources. And the cost for us is it's not a huge sacrifice because we enjoy it. But for
mm,
someone else who maybe does have children, or both people work full-time jobs, it becomes much more challenging. And it's so important to be really sober about the sacrifice that we need to make in order to achieve our goals. because sometimes when we look at it, and we can have so much more self-compassion to think, okay, I did it for 3 days and that's awesome because
Mm.
it did take sacrifice to achieve this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so, so important. And I think we often dance between pleasure and duty around food.
Mm,
And I think that's one of the self-compassion is like so important because for me, that's the piece where the one day doesn't become the permanent fail on the thing that you're trying to change, right?
yeah, so true. I like to say, one great moment, it can change your present moment, but a collection of such moments can change the course of your life.
I
And
love
it's
that.
about the accumulation of things, and your self-compassion plays such a huge role.
Massive.
Mm.
And I think there are a lot of books on habits, and I've read quite a few of them. I am sort of diagnosed, if you like, neurodivergent, ADHD, and it helped me make a lot of sense of my life, my choices, things that I found difficult, things that I found super easy, say, compared to other people as well. I think there are always pros and cons to everything. But something that I found fascinating was around habits. And I remember a hypnotherapist saying to me in our introduction session, he was saying, it's like just brushing your teeth. You do it automatically. And I'm like, I'm just going to stop you right there, buddy, and say, I have to every single day set up a whole new neural pathway for
Mm.
me to feel that I can stand there and brush my teeth. That may be mind blowing to you to consider, but I want to let you into my brain and help you understand that it's not just like brushing your teeth because I actually have to think about it or I forget to do it or and so many people are the same. And so I wondered, have you come across these kind of, oh, you're not an average case of habit implementation? I know you talk about various examples in the book and pitfalls, and I think that's fantastic because I haven't actually seen that before.
Yeah.
But can we speak to those people who just constantly feel like, well, habits aren't even for me because they always feel like I'm starting from scratch?
Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing your experience because I am also diagnosed as neurodivergent ADHD. And I didn't realize I had ADHD until this blew my mind until I was reading my book as an audiobook. So I was reading it back to myself and I'm like, I am spicy. I am definitely spicy because the things I'm saying about myself, how,
Yeah.
I dislike routine, how I
Mm.
struggle with consistency, how I feel suffocated with the idea of structure.
Hmm.
Like, there's something just not
There's
quite
something
right.
to that,
Something's
Gina.
wired a little differently here.
And so it was that a bit of an interesting journey in
Oh,
itself
it was.
to, because I would imagine as an academic on the topic of habits, you've done the research. I actually
Mm,
want to unpack what researchers agree on when it comes to habits
yeah.
as well. But then there's you, the
Yeah.
individual. And, I think it's a really interesting thing to unpack how much our individuality then impacts what we know to be true for everybody kind of
Yeah. And
stuff.
that's actually the next study I'm really interested in doing is
Mm,
looking at temperament and personality types and trying to understand who is more or less likely to acquire habits long term and who is more or less likely to develop unwanted habits or be able to break their habits quicker because there's no cookie cutter formula, there's no one size fits all, and it's so important to know how your brain works. And for
mm.
people like you and I who don't really thrive in routine or structure, but also do thrive in routine and
Yeah,
structure, there's
damn it.
this huge paradox with it. Um, I know for me, there are things at work. Like, for example, I like to exercise most mornings, but I won't do the same thing. I'll rock up to
Mm,
the gym and be like, what do I feel like doing today? This morning I did hot yoga completely randomly. Tomorrow I've got Pilates
mm.
booked in, but I might not do Pilates. I might get there and decide to do something else. My routine is getting to the gym, but what I do has to just be free flowing and spontaneous and whatever I want to do in the moment. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not being a pro at one thing, because that means I have to do it every day, and that just doesn't work for my brain.
Yeah, it's so true. I realized for me, it's exactly the same as that. It's
Mm.
about creating a sense of broad habit that you want to achieve, movement. Keep
Yeah.
it that broad.
Yeah.
Because then 30 minutes of movement is like, oh, how do I fancy? I might pick up those dumbbells and do a few
Yes.
different Instagram PT exercises. And
Yeah.
the next day, I mean, you can always get me to tennis comp. That I will never have a trouble being motivated to do. But I think it's fascinating that my favorite sport is tennis because the ball is moving so fast that
Mm.
I have no choice but to follow the ball,
Yeah.
and something different is happening every single point. I have to move in a different direction. I have to use a different strategy. So it really appeals
Totally.
to my I need a choose your own adventure style of discipline. And I
Yeah.
think that then speaks to, and I want to ask you about that, how much is learning about yourself deeply enough
Mm.
important to then implementing habit change?
Yeah. It's so important.
Mm,
And alongside that, when you learn about yourself and you stop trying to do what other people are doing, that's when we can thrive. I
mm,
remember during COVID when we were sort of stuck at home for a period of time, and I was practicing different stress management strategies to try to sort of help other people and help myself as well throughout it. And I remember downloading every stress management app and meditation app you could think of. And I was like, I am terrible at this. I struggle to sit still. I struggle with wandering. My mind's wandering, and I feel like I'm not doing it right, whether I am or not. I
mm,
just didn't like it. And then I remember going outside and playing around with my puppy in my backyard and feeling so chilled. And I'm like, this is my meditation. This is my stress relief. This is my choice. This is how it works for me. And it was such a beautiful learning moment, because when I stopped the noise, when I stopped trying to do what I'm told I should do and what other people are doing, and just found what works for me, everything fell into place. And I'm like,
mm,
okay, this is what I do. I get in nature and I play with my dog and I sit outside for 10 minutes, and that's my meditation. And that's okay.
mm.
It doesn't have to look differently to this.
Yeah, it's the huge problem for me with externalization,
Mm.
mass externalization of health messages. You've
Yeah.
got infinite numbers of protocols you could be following, dietary changes you could be making. There's like, if someone's convincing enough in their sales pitch, you could believe anything is the perfect way to do something.
Yeah.
And yet I feel like every time we listen too much to any one thing, we then actually lose that extra little piece of listening to ourselves. It's like we erode our own self connection.
It's so
Mm,
true. Yeah. And when
mm.
we come back home to ourselves, I think that's the only way we can live the best versions of ourselves. But it's hard because it requires us to stop comparing ourselves to other people.
Oh,
It
how do we
it
do
requires
that,
us to,
Gina?
well, gosh, I haven't worked that one out yet.
Another $1 million question because it's a
Yeah,
huge
careless.
issue, isn't it?
Yeah,
Wow.
because for me, for example, I remember hearing someone on a podcast say they exercise 3 times a week because it takes their body a little bit of time to recover. And I'm like,
Mm,
wow, imagine the liberation of being completely okay with exercising 3 times a week. Because Gina's brain, my brain's like, no, girl, you've got to do 5 minimum.
mm.
Otherwise, you're not really being active. But there's constantly these lessons where I'm like, but that's what works for that person, and they feel good doing that. And like, you could do the same, and whatever that looks like for you, it is just stopping the noise. Maybe spending less time on social media would be really helpful as
I
a
think that'd
starting
be
point.
pretty helpful. I mean, how
Yeah.
many of us are saying we don't have time for anything that's important to us?
Yeah.
And yet we look at our average screen time per day, and I think you could carve out a cheeky hour. So it's one of those hard truths, right? And it's
Yeah.
everyone's in it. They're just as hooked as the next guy. And I think it's been really powerful for me to even just realize I used to take my phone to every room I was in, around my
Mm,
apartment.
yeah.
Like, why does it have to be with me everywhere? I'm just going to the living room. Like, it's not a
Yeah.
big place. So I think just really raising your awareness around how dependent you are on socials or how much time online, focusing on other people's truths and eroding your own truth, I think is a huge piece of this. Oh my gosh, so important. Okay, I want to talk about what researchers agree on when it comes to habits, because that's a pretty foundational 3 point explanation of what we're dealing with. And I love this is
Mm,
right at the start of your book. And then something that caught my eye was distinguishing habits from behaviors. So let's unpack what
yeah.
those three things are and then talk about that.
Yeah. So the characteristics of a habit are that every habit has a history of repetition. So it's
Hmm.
something that we've done more than one time before. It has a high degree of automaticity. And automaticity is that point where you're no longer having to focus and think about every step of doing this particular behavior. It might be something that you do without even thinking of, or you don't need a reminder to do it anymore. It's just something that happens automatically. So that's
Mm,
automaticity. And then the third point is that every single habit is triggered by something in our internal or external environment. So those triggers could be the time of day, the place you're in, how you're feeling emotionally, the people that you're around, or what you've just done beforehand. Every habit is triggered by something.
mm. Okay. All right.
We also
And
all agree that it does not just take 21 days to change a
yeah, I was
habit.
going to say, yeah.
No research around
Hmm.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the high degree of automaticity, why do some things become more naturally easy for us to automate than other things? Because I could
Yeah.
name a million things that I do that are really good for me that I find super easy to automate. So why is it the brushing of the teeth that I find, or the cleaning of the pan after a meal? Like I would
Yeah.
defer that a
So,
thousand times over, and yet it has to happen.
oh,
So why are some
totally.
things, you know? Ah.
Like develop quicker. There's
Mm,
lots of reasons. One of the biggest ones is the complexity of the behavior. So the more complex the behavior is, the longer it takes to become automatic or hit that point of automaticity. So
hmm.
some of the latest research shows, say somebody was asked to wash their hands every day. It took them about 2 weeks to hit a point of automaticity compared to someone else who was asked to go to the gym. That took about 7 months for that, like that whole motion of getting
Mm,
to the gym to feel completely automatic. And when you think about it, washing your hands, it's easy. You've always got to tap around. It's accessible. It doesn't take a lot of time compared with going to the gym, which requires motivation, a change of clothes, getting in the car, driving through traffic, like
mm,
getting to the gym and having much more time to actually like to enact that particular behavior. So complexity is a big one. And the second one is how badly you want it, how much you care about it, or how much reward you perceive that you're going to get from that thing. Something
hmm.
like brushing your teeth is such a should behavior. Like no one
Mm.
enjoys brushing their teeth. It's boring, it's time consuming, it feels tedious. It's something you do every
Maybe
single
that's what it
day,
is.
twice a
Yeah.
day. Like it's just
Oh,
not.
do we have to do this
Yeah,
again?
I would say one
Yeah.
day, if I was to invent one thing, it's going to be like this mouth bomb. It's kind of like a Mentos, but like no sugar or toxins that you just
Yeah.
put in your mouth and it explodes and it's flossed and brushed and done everything you need to. And you just have it once or twice a day. And that's going to be my invention one day.
I will be your first investor. I am buying shares in that company. I am. My poor dentist, Lewis, if you're listening to this, I do actually brush my teeth twice a day. I'm just letting you know. But
Enjoy
I
it.
just, it's not automated, never
Yeah.
has been. So
Yeah.
you think it's actually, the research is showing us it's because it's a should and a have to.
Yeah, and I mean, the act of brushing your teeth might be automated, but when you do it, might not be automatic. So
Mm.
you don't have to learn how to brush your teeth. As soon as you
Mm-mm.
start, you know exactly what you're doing. You can do it fairly mindlessly, but it's the act of starting that's the hardest part. Was that fair to say?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Mm,
And it's because it doesn't offer you an instant reward. And
mm,
so it's just not that enjoyable, and you'd rather be doing something else. And so your brain's like, "Oh, I'm going to go do this instead."
mm. Yeah, very
Same with washing
interesting.
hands.
And so there's obviously quite a few types of things like that that fall into that slight should and
Mm,
have to, and it's a good idea to category. So are they the ones that you think spicy people tend to be the worst at?
I think so. From my own personal life, 100%.
Okay.
Because spicy people like instant rewards.
Mm,
We want something to feel good right now. And a lot of the things that are healthy for us, like brushing our teeth or washing the dishes, are going to be good for us long term. Say
mm,
brushing your teeth one time is not going to do anything. It's not until you've been brushing and flossing for months or years that your dentist is like, "Hey, well done. You're doing a good job. You don't need to get dentures or fillings or whatever it might
mm.
be." It's a long-term game, and that just doesn't work for spicy brains. Like, we want the reward now.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we need the 10 points and a gold star chart in our bathrooms, Gina.
It actually, like,
Look
we
at
joke
that.
about this, but legitimately helps.
Wow. Even for adults, you found like
Even for
actually
adults.
having
Yeah.
achievement charts.
Yes.
Wow.
We don't grow out of reward learning as adults, which
Mm-hmm.
is why when we're trying to create a new habit, using something like a habit tracker is so powerful. A habit tracker is essentially when you write down the habit you want to create and then you tick off every time you've done it. And the really, really good apps are the ones that are going to give you something like a confetti party or a little like vibration or like a woohoo or something that gives you that hit of dopamine that makes you feel really good about doing it. So you want to
Mm.
do it again. It reinforces the habit in your life. We never grow out of reward learning. So gold stars it is every time you brush your teeth, Alex, from now on.
I'm up for it. Who knows? And like, so then if the reward learning works, is it still though about getting us on a path to automaticity? Like,
Yes.
surely at some point you don't need a freaking gold star. Surely.
Definitely, definitely.
Okay.
Once
Mm.
something starts to feel automatic and you start to notice that you're no longer having to motivate yourself to do it or remind yourself to
Mm.
do it, you know you've hit automaticity. Then you
Hmm.
can stop the gold stars. And if you think of something like putting your seatbelt on in the car, I assume that you always do that.
Yeah.
That is automatic. You don't need to give yourself a tick for doing it. So there is a transition point.
Hmm. So I need to take that, I don't want to die, I'm putting on my seatbelt automaticity to, I
That
don't want feelings. That feels revolting.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have a play with that because I always do it, but I've always been genuinely curious as to why I've never been able to automate it this
Yeah,
thus
I'm the
far.
same. I know
Mm.
exactly what you mean. I always do it, but the time is sometimes it's first thing when I wake up. Sometimes I'm like, I'll do it after breakfast. Sometimes
Yeah,
I'm,
because
I'll
I
do it
do a
after
lot of
gym.
thinking. I'm like, yeah, but then if I've had my eggs, that's going to taste really gross. And then so, like, I plan it, but then I don't want to have my
Yeah.
first cup of tea and have a minty taste. And there's a lot of chat going on in the brain
This
around
is
this
daily
activity.
struggle, literally. I'm like, right, when's breakfast? And can I brush my teeth before or after?
Yeah.
And what's that going to taste like?
I feel like a lot of people are hopefully going to feel a little bit comforted by the fact that sometimes you feel like a failure, but
Mm,
actually there's just a lot more to it. Getting to know yourself, getting to know your own journeys of automaticity, what's going to motivate you. This is awesome. And the third point, being triggered in stable contexts. I
yes.
was intrigued by what that means. What does triggered mean? As in, is that like, oh, I'm going to do
Yeah.
this now because I'm here and I'm at home and I've just had my breakfast and my tea, so I can definitely brush my teeth. Is that what you're saying? It's not like a trauma trigger or
Yeah. So
something.
stable context. No, although that can also be, but not generally for habits. They're more for like impulsive behaviors. But
Okay.
think of, let's say, the time of day, like the time that you say move your body might be similar every day. And your brain knows, for me, it's the morning, for example. My brain knows first thing in the morning, what I do is I move my body. So my habit to move is triggered by the time of day. The
Mm.
other trigger that I have is, say, I always feed my dog straight after I finish my dinner. So my trigger is finishing dinner, and then my habit is feeding my dog.
Oh, that's a
I
good
never
moment for
feed her
them.
beforehand, and
Mm.
I never feed her during my meal. It's always straight after. So that's the trigger. Sitting in the
Mm.
car is a trigger for putting your seatbelt on, and the seatbelt is the habit, but you're triggered by sitting in the car. You take seats lots of other places in your day, but you're not triggered to put your seatbelt on anywhere else other than the car. That's the stable context.
Got it. Okay. And so with stable contexts then, why is it that with things that we're trying to build a habit around, some of us
Mm.
can go like 2, 3 weeks and we're kicking our goals and isn't this amazing? And then you miss one day because you feel a bit under the weather, or if you exercise outside, it's pouring with rain and you cut yourself some slack that day.
Yeah.
Then the next day is really busy at work. So you think, yeah, no, I don't have time. And then you just jump straight back on the horse and you keep going. No big deal.
Yeah.
But someone
Yeah.
else is going to get to that 2, 3 week mark, miss one day, tell themselves this horrible story about how it's not for them, they can't do it, they can't hack it. I'm curious about the impact of generally having negative self talk and perhaps having positive self talk, and actually working on that as a vehicle for them being more successful at habit adoption.
Oh, I love that you've asked this. Mindset is everything when it
Mm,
comes to the habits we create and the habits that we break. Every single person, even the most successful people, will have setbacks. It's not if, it's when. Like, life happens, and we will always have a hurdle. There will always be something that gets in the way that we didn't anticipate. And it's not a matter of if it happens, it's when. And then we want to then go, what is my setback strategy? And I always like to have some kind of, I call them bounce back plans. My bounce
mm,
back plan ready for when my like hurdle comes, because I know it's going to. And the most successful people aren't the ones that not fall, because we all have falls. They're the ones that get back up and do it quickly. The ones that know that success is not linear and they're bound to have these setbacks. And it's okay. It's actually part of the process. And they're able to have that self compassion to go, tomorrow's a new day, or this moment's a new moment, instead of having that all or nothing mentality, which just doesn't serve us at all.
not at all. And do you have advice for people who are trying to transition from all or nothing to no biggie? This is part of the overall picture, because that's work to do in itself. Like, how
Yeah,
could that work look for people?
totally. And it's hard. And no, even like the transition of that mindset is going to be a process of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You're going to be
Mm,
really good and not have it all or nothing thinking for a day, a minute, an hour, and then you're going to fall back into it. And then you can exit out and fall back in, because you're retraining your brain to think differently. I think just keeping in mind what really helped me was to think, it's not if, it's when. Is that everybody is going to have a setback. The setback is part of it. So for me to create this like beautiful plan and to expect it to go perfectly, that's not actually how it's going to happen. And so
mm.
when I changed my expectation around the journey, that's when it was like, okay, this setback's part of it. I expected this to happen, and I have a strategy for this very moment. And I think that really helps.
Yeah. What's your bounce back strategy? Let's say Gina gets the flu and you're out for the count for like 3 or 4 days, maybe even a week.
Mhm.
And like, is there so this is actually two parts. Is there a particular habit, a healthy habit that you find harder than another one to actually bounce back with? And what is your strategy for the easy and the hard? Like, does that change?
Yeah. I am pretty regular with movement,
Mm.
but when I'm not, I'm not. And I don't know why. Like, say I've had a series of like crappy night sleeps,
Mm.
or it's probably the only thing that would stop me from training, to be honest, because I don't really get sick, and busyness never stops me from moving, because I need to move for my mental health. So
Yeah.
it's really about like, if I've had poor sleep, I don't go to the gym. I don't move my body. And then this becomes a cascade where I'm like, I don't even know what to do when I'm there now. And I feel so unfit and I'm a stranger at this place. And it's just like this whole mindset that goes around it. And then
Mm.
one of my plans is I always remind myself the heaviest weight is the gym door. You've just got to go through the front door.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And the
Mm.
rest is it's fine. You know exactly, Gina, you've been training your entire life. You know what to do. You know how to walk on a treadmill and sit on a bike if that's all you do there. It's absolutely fine. So I just think to myself, the hardest step is that first step, and the rest is going to be okay. So I just need to do that. And that
Mm.
helps me a lot.
So just think of that one little step in front of you and
Yeah.
recognize it as the hard one.
Yeah, and
Mm.
I'm not trying to get back into fit, active Gina. I'm just trying to get to the gym today. And that if that's all I do this week, that's better than last week, and that's all right. So it's just these micro habits, not expecting big goals or big changes. I'm just expecting a small change today.
Mm. Oh, there's so much goodness in what you've just shared. It's so true. We often create like big statements for ourselves. I
Yeah.
mean, I even sometimes I do business coaching, and I can't tell you the amount of times that people have said, yeah, today it's all about I'm going to do the website. Okay, that's quite big. So how about
Yeah,
just
that's
some
a big
bullet
thing.
points for your bio and what that might look like? Or, your
Yeah.
top 3 things that you're going to offer, or, really make things smaller and simpler in our minds, because that for me has always instinctively meant that someone's actually going to kick some goals today versus you're definitely not going to get your website done today. Just like someone who's been out for the count on exercise for a month is definitely not going to feel fantastically fit and
Yeah.
strong today after that workout. You might think, oh my God, I'm so out of shape. Mm. Mm.
Yeah. I think we really set ourselves up to fail when we try to aim for things like go hard or go home, or if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. I loathe those
Can't
kinds of
stand
quotes
that
because
quote.
they're
I'm
not
so glad it came up.
evidence-based.
It's the
Oh my
worst.
God, I hate it. I
I
hate
actually
it.
feel
You never
allergic to
ever
it when
show
I
me this.
see
Like,
it.
I will literally block you.
Mm. Hmm. I totally agree. Because
Yeah,
yes,
because it sets us up to fail.
mm,
Yeah.
it
And
does.
the
And you're
research shows
never
that
going
it
to
doesn't
be that
work, that
guru.
ever. Yeah.
Mm,
And there's no need to be. It's not sustainable. It's not enjoyable. It's not desirable. Like, it's pointless. It's always pointless. But research shows that the smaller the behaviors that we're trying to change, they're not only easier to achieve, but they're much easier to sustain long term. And the whole game of habits is sustainability. It's about consistency, doing things for the long term. And trying to change big things is not sustainable. So it's so counterproductive. And if
mm,
I think if anyone gets anything out of this chat, is start so small, you feel like you can't say no to doing it. So small, and just
mm.
go with that.
It's almost ridiculous, the thing that
Yeah.
you've named. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. Love that. I have a question around the things we're trying to also stop doing. And
Mhm.
does the brain perceive the adoption of a new habit to be a harder building journey neurologically than a I want to stop doing this journey?
It's going to depend on the habit,
Hmm.
your intrinsic motivation, and like why you're doing it. For
Yeah.
example, I worked with someone recently. It was actually my physiotherapist. He was sort of doing an adjustment, and I just was just looking down at his hand, and he bites his nails. And I didn't
Hmm.
say anything, but he noticed that I saw his fingers, and he felt embarrassed by that. And
Aw.
he's like, Gina, I need you to just give me a tip, give me a hint. And I just gave him a little bit of advice around, changing this habit. I saw him a year later, and he said, since I saw you that day, I haven't touched my nails. I haven't bit my nails one time. I actually had to go buy nail clippers, which was just like profound for him.
Mm.
And he said, I did it overnight. And for him, it was such an emotive moment that it meant more for him to not have that moment of embarrassment again than
Mm.
to continue in this habit. So for him, it was instant. Whereas creating a new habit takes time because you have to completely rewire a certain part of your brain. And that time can be anything from 2 weeks to 10 months. It depends on a whole range of things. But our brain can also see letting go of a habit as losing something,
Mm.
or it could also be very empowering. It depends on how damaging the habit is for you. I love breaking habits. Like, I get a total kick out of it because I
Mm-hmm.
like the idea of having nothing in my life that controls me. I don't have anything that I have to have or have to do. And so I notice, like, for example, I love a good chai latte that I make at home. But I'm like, oh, I've been having this for a whole week in a row. I'm going to just have something else instead. And I'll go to something else just to make a point to not get stuck in this routine of doing the same thing every day. I don't
You
know.
are
I'm weird.
definitely spicy.
So spicy. Oh my gosh.
I've been with my husband for 20 years. He still has to ask me what kind of coffee I want when he orders because I change it up all the time. I do something different. I'm like,
I
yeah, that's
love
for
it.
piccolo for like a month. But I'm like, let's change this up.
That's hilarious. It's like when
I
people go,
know.
what's your normal daily routine? I'm like, I don't have such a thing. Like, what do you normally eat for breakfast? I
Yeah.
don't know. It's every day will be different. And I won't know until I literally pull a plate out and I'll be like, oh, I'll have this. Like, it's different.
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it makes me giggle because I'm exactly the same. And it was not my intention to make this a how neurospicy people can adapt
But here we are.
good habits, but here we are. And look, I think it's great because I actually talked to the wonderful multi New York Times bestseller Chris Guillebeau recently. He says his name is Gillibot, but I'm French on my mum's side. I cannot pronounce that way, so I say it properly, and he laughs at that. But he and I were talking about being neurospicy and how a lot of the previous habit books we had read. I mean, God bless him, James Clear. It's actually a brilliant work.
Yeah.
The Power of Habit as well, like really great books. I acknowledge the brilliance, but
Mm.
I couldn't see myself in them. All I could see was failure. I genuinely felt like your book was actually a much more open
Oh,
expression of the
oh.
exploration of the habit topic where lots of different people could see themselves because of the examples you used
Mm.
and so I'm actually thrilled it's kind of gone down that road because a lot of people see failure in themselves when they read habit books
Yeah.
and I believe you've got something here that is really trying to help someone see what habit means for them and how they can create positive things. So I
Oh,
had to
thank
share that because
you.
it
Thank
really was a
you
notable
so much.
difference. Mm.
Thank you so much. And, I'm so conscious as well as a habit researcher myself. It's almost like this expectation that I've got the world's best habits.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah.
most part, I live a very healthy lifestyle that I've designed and I'm really happy with it. But I also have moments where life happens, where
Mm.
I have trauma triggers that totally derail me. And they might derail me for days where I'm just not doing anything I intend to do or desire to do. And we are all human. And that was such a strong intention with the book, is to make it so accessible and relatable to all walks of life, whatever age you are, whatever, journey that you're on. I wanted it to be like a guide that can just handhold you through all the parts of it. So that means a
Mm.
lot that you've shared that. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. No, it's true. Um, I want to talk, we've only got a few minutes left, but I do want to explore breaking habits just a little bit more now that we have acknowledged that we find it extremely easy to shake things up and do lots of different things. I want to talk about some of the habits that we know might be self-sabotaging, and yet it's just like, but it's after lunch. I have my chocolate, but you know, now, and I'm sad, so I'm going to have the ice cream, but I've broken up with someone. I've got every right to eat a ton of junk food right now.
Yeah.
You know, Hollywood says so. And I think there's
Yeah.
so many cultural subliminal reasons we end up in these emotional patterns, especially around food.
Yeah.
I wondered whether you could share a few insights if someone's feeling that, going through the recognition that that's
Mhm.
something that they're sabotaging their desire for a healthier overall picture
Mm.
in their own habits. Like, where do we start with that?
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I was the world's biggest emotional eater, so I totally relate to what you're saying. I think it's getting to the realization that, yes, this is going to make me feel good in the moment. But as soon as I'm finished eating this highly processed, sugary food, I'm now going to be served with a side order of guilt and shame. And I'm still going to be sad about whatever it was I was sad about. So
Mm,
actually, this is just not a long-term game. Like, it's not a good idea.
mm,
And I think when I started to really notice that, that's when it all changed for me. The other thing that really helps is every time you do a habit, you're reinforcing it in your life. And every time you choose not to do a habit, you're slowly breaking it away from your life. It's actually called synaptic pruning in the brain, where
mm,
our brain like starts to prune away the neural pathways that we're not using anymore. And I remember thinking to myself when I was in the cycle of emotional eating, Gina, you're not just emotionally eating now. You're actually making it harder for yourself to stop doing this tomorrow and the day after that. And if you choose not to now, you're going to be making it easier for yourself to stop this habit for the future. And
mm,
that became a point of difference in that it's hard to just go, well, just this one time, just
mm.
today. I'll start again on Monday because I know that I'm actually going to make it harder for myself and I'm reinforcing this unwanted habit. The other thing that I think is really cool to do, and it sounds weird, but it for some reason works, is to really taste the food. Like really sit with it. And
Mm.
I remember doing this with, one of my favorite chocolate chip cookie biscuits, and I was like, this actually tastes awful. Like
Yeah.
it tastes like chemicals
Yeah.
and it's all weird and it's leaving there's a weird taste in my mouth. And I actually got this idea from a study they did in smokers where they got smokers to inhale like 30 cigarettes in a row and like describe what it was like. And they were like, that's disgusting. And they had a
Mm.
100% quit rate, which was brilliant. And
Mm.
I was like, I'm going to try this. So I did that. I became really mindful of this food that I perceived as highly palatable and I was super into it. And I'm like, this is actually like it's rubbish. I'm not interested in it anymore.
Yeah.
So noticing how it felt in my body after.
Mm.
And it
And that mindfulness is so key, right? I mean, because if you grow up and you've seen have a break, have a Kit Kat a
yeah.
million times on TV, you will
Mhm.
equate the break with the Kit Kat.
Yeah.
I remember doing
Yeah.
it in at uni, and I'd never done it before. But all of a
Mhm.
sudden, we were in between rehearsals for a musical, and I was having a break. We were going down to, and I had a Kit Kat, and I was like, "Oh, just like the ad." I didn't even really think too much of it. I was 21, but I look back at that and I think, "Oh, how did you actually break up with junk, Alex?" Because that's actually quite an interesting psychological journey, and people have really different stories. So your mindfulness was around taste.
Mm.
My mindfulness was around company values, how
Yeah.
much the CEO is being paid compared to the frontline worker,
Yeah.
where the ingredients come from, like becoming just this nerdy
Yeah.
person around everything to do with every ingredient and how it was produced. And then mindfulness around how awful that all was. There was literally nothing positive
Yeah. I was,
once I did that.
yeah.
And ugh,
You're just not interested anymore. I
not
love that
interested. Yeah.
because
It's
that's
not
almost
about, oh,
core
I
value.
shouldn't. Oh, I'm trying to cut down. I'm trying to be good. Like
Yeah.
all that BS we used to say to ourselves. I'm like,
Yeah.
I am not giving a penny to
Yeah.
that system. No, thank you.
True. The other thing I think of is the amount of research, literally the millions of dollars that food companies put into trying to
Mm,
create the bliss point. And that bliss
mm,
point is the perfect blend of fat, sugar, and salt that makes you addicted and wanting more of the
mm-hmm.
product. And I'm like, I am subscribing and opening a packet of something that's designed to make me want more and more and more and more of it. Like it's designed to hijack the reward system in my brain,
Yeah.
and it's unnatural. And I was like, I'm not going to be part of this at all. And I just went cold turkey with it. I'm not interested in that kind of food anymore.
Yeah, that's it.
Mm.
And I think there's a danger now because those marketers are now working for healthier companies, and you see things like gluten-free cheesy puffs or organic Oreos, and I'm like, mate, that's a
I
bit of a
know.
stretch,
Yeah,
and I think it's actually we do need to be a bit smart. And
we do.
people used to laugh at me for teaching my boy before he could even talk that the picture of the monkey on the cereal box at the eye level of the toddler walking down the aisle was designed to trick him. They were like, as if he gets any of it. But the other day, we were talking about he's a ball kid in the summer for summer tennis when all the pros are in town. And there was this pizza party at the end last year. And there were no gluten-free options. He happens to be gluten-free for medical reasons. And I said, oh, we could bring like a really nice BYO gluten-free pizza. So you and probably a couple of the dudes and girls who shouldn't be having the gluten, but they're eating to fit in and all the other things. He's like, Mum, I wouldn't even eat the Pizza Hut pizzas if they did have a gluten-free option. They're disgusting. They're so full of crap. Um, then, just sort of went on this tirade. And I thought, wow, like it really does matter what you put into our brains, whether it's the good
Mm.
stuff or whether it's the evil, insidious advertising stuff, it goes in there. So I think
Yeah.
to your point, which we see throughout your book, like let's start feeding the brain positively and then positive things come.
Yeah.
Mm.
And coming home to yourself and your values, what
Yes.
works for you, not
Mm.
what you're being told by whatever industry.
Yeah, exactly. So my last question then is around coming home to yourself
Hmm.
and your values.
Yeah.
Because in this crowded, hyper externalized world where we're taking in so many more messages than we were ever designed to do, what could some really positive, lovely things be for someone to do to start doing that work this week? So you're more in touch with the why of
Mm.
of adopting habits that you want to adopt and haven't maybe successfully done so in the past. What could it
Yeah.
look like?
I guess to the theme of that is really about noticing. It's
Mm,
noticing you, noticing how you feel when you do something compared to something else. Like, for example, we know journaling is a good idea. The research tells us that. I
mm,
hate journaling. I hate it. I'm like,
mm.
I feel like I'm talking to myself. It's really awkward. I don't know what to say. Like, I've got terrible handwriting. It's just, I don't like it.
We
But,
are sisters, Gina.
we are
I've
really?
yeah,
Oh my
I
God, I need you.
cannot stand it. Yeah.
Yes. But you asked me to write three things I'm grateful for and do a gratitude journal. I'm all about that. I
I can do
really
that
enjoy that. Yeah,
too. We
exactly.
do it around the dinner table. I
Me
find verbal
too.
works for us, so that's what we
Yes.
do.
Yeah, what went well today?
Mm,
Exactly. And I think it's notice. It's if something doesn't feel good, don't feel bad about it. Just go, that
mm,
just doesn't work for me. Own it. Be okay with it. Like, accept that
mm.
that's you and you are a beautiful individual and that's all you need to be. And if journaling or meditation or gratitude journals aren't your thing, that's perfectly fine. There are 10 other options you
Yeah.
can pick that are going to serve your well-being. There's
Mm,
no point trying to have this uphill battle with yourself.
mm. Can you imagine chastising yourself for not journaling? I mean, and that is the world we then live in, because if you're
Yeah.
doing a protocol and you're doing someone's online course and they're saying, today I want you to write, this much, and like if you already feel like you failed, you're not even going to get to the good stuff in their program
Yeah,
because you don't like the journaling. So that
exactly.
is a brilliant piece of gold to finish with. Well, I encourage everybody to get your book. I think it's fabulous.
Thank you.
Details in the show notes, talked about it in the intro. We can, of course, connect with you online. And I have not done, confession, the masterclass that you have on offer, but I do want to mention it. Can you just share a little bit about what's in it? Because I was intrigued about it when I was researching, but of course, didn't have time.
Yeah, so it's a free habit masterclass. It's these 5 short videos that get sent to you that teach you all about what is a habit, how to create new ones, how to break old ones, why self-control doesn't work, and what to do instead. And it's not one of those resources where I will spam you with emails after. I'm terrible at marketing. So
Me
it
too.
really is just a free
I'm like,
resource.
sign up to my newsletter. I'll hardly ever bother you. Don't worry.
I literally have written 2 newsletters ever. I'm like, be a subscriber, get in the know. And I don't write to people, but maybe one day. But the idea is that it's a free resource as just something to share with people to teach you the foundations of your habits. So the 5 short videos, you can sign up to it on my website.
I love it. What a beautiful next step. Thank you so much for joining me, Gina. This was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, my spicy sister.
I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment-free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.